Jay Shear.
Jay Shear.
Jay Shear.
Jay Shear,
business consultant.
Jay Shear.
Jay Shear Business Consulting.
Hey, everybody. I'm Jay Shear with Jay Shear Business Consulting. We build solid foundations for service-based businesses to grow and scale and achieve the results and success they deserve. And you've joined Business Minds Coffee Chat. Viktor Frankl said, "Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." On today's episode, we talk about managing our attitudes, resilience, the power of the defiant human spirit, learning to soar, and more. Our guest's story reads like the plot of a Hollywood film. At the top of her game, and while training with her teammates for the 1988 Calgary Winter Olympics, this champion cross-country skier was run over by a speeding truck during a bike ride and suffered massive life-threatening injuries. Told she would never walk again, she faced a daunting recovery and an uncertain future. Fast forward to today, she's a mother of three, an internationally renowned keynote speaker, author of 6 best-selling books, an executive coach. She's inspired films, and her TED Talk, "A Broken Body Isn't a Broken Person," has been viewed over 1.7 million times. Please welcome Janine Shepherd. Janine, it's wonderful to see you. Thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. It's a delight.
It is my pleasure. And, you know, I want to share with you that your story, which has so many layers to it, is such an incredible inspiration. And consuming your content, researching you, reviewing your books, it's really been a game changer for me, and it's certainly given me a completely different perspective on how I view my own life. So I want to thank you up front and show you some gratitude. And I thought that a good starting point for us would be to talk about those moments that tend to define us, that often change the course of our lives. So why don't we wind the clock back a bit? And if you can share some of your story that I alluded to in the intro, and then we're going to fast forward to what today looks like.
Okay, thanks, Jay. Well, it's perfect that you started with the Viktor Frankl quote. That was one of the first books, Man's Search for Meaning, that I read when I got out of hospital. And in fact, I'm rereading it at the moment. It sort of has a permanent place next to my bed. And I mean, there's no greater example of finding meaning in suffering. And I think that it's so relevant right now because so many people are struggling and suffering with the pandemic and what we're going through. So, you know, going back in time, as you said, I remember there was a sort of a seminal moment in my life when I got home from hospital after spending almost 6 months in the spinal ward. You know, broken neck, broken back. The list of injuries was so long, they didn't think I'd live. So I got home from hospital. I was in a wheelchair, in a plaster body cast, told that I'd never be able to do the things I did before. My university studies went on hold. Of course, I wasn't, you know, I was headed to the Olympics and that dream was crushed. And I remember I was really struggling. I remember sitting on my bed with my mum and we were both crying. And I remember her saying to me, "I wonder if life will ever be good again." And I thought, how could it? You know, I've lost everything that I valued. And it was this sort of moment in life that I think we all get to when we have a choice. There are crossroads at every moment in life where we get to decide, do we stay down or do we get up? Do we say no or do we say yes to life? And I realized that the only way that I was going to get through this experience that was so utterly devastating was to let go of the life that I had, which was my Olympic dreams. I was on my way to become an exercise physiologist. My whole life revolved around sport. And it was in that letting go, not just of those dreams, but letting go of the way I thought life was meant to look, that life sort of said, okay, well, now I'm going to show you something else. And, one of my favorite quotes is Marcel Proust, who says, the journey of discovery is not seeking new landscapes, it's in having new eyes. And I think in that letting go of how we think it's supposed to be, we find that life is filled with possibilities. And it was in that letting go that, that moment in life when that aeroplane flew over, when I was outside in my wheelchair and plaster cast, and I thought, okay, well, if I can't walk, then maybe I can fly. I mean, it was ridiculous. It was the most remarkable insight. And, I couldn't even walk. How could I fly an airplane? I'd never wanted to fly in my life. But that moment changed my life.
So can we pause there for just a moment? Because you shared something that's profound, and that's around the letting go, the process of letting go. And I'm curious, from your perspective and from your own experience, what did the letting go look like for you? How did you, if you can maybe walk us through almost a step-by-step process, or at least maybe an overview of how you were thinking, how you processed what was going on, and how you were able to release that? Because I know that's going to be so relevant for many that are listening right now.
Yeah. Well, letting go takes practice. I mean, it's a skill, and it's something that I've got, better at as life has progressed. I think the way I see it is when we hold on to the way we think life is supposed to look, which is obviously layered from our early childhood, of all the structure that we think, that has been passed on to us. Maybe it's expectations from parents and friends and teachers and our own selves. We think that's how it's meant to be. And I've got my life really well mapped out, which I did. I was going to the Olympics. I was going to be an exercise physiologist when I finished my university degree. All of my friends were athletes. That was my life. And so I realized, I sort of had this insight that, I was suffering. I was depressed. I was struggling. And in fact, there was this moment where, covered in a plaster body cast, I actually dragged myself onto the floor of my bedroom. And my prayer was, God, show me a way through this, or show me a way out of this. I had what I call a death experience after my accident, where I left my body, and I didn't want to come back. And of course, so there was that surprise of, why am I back here with this broken body? I'm an athlete. This is not how I want to live the rest of my life. So that was my cry into the darkness. I didn't want to live, and I think that moment was just, I realized that the more I hold on to my old life, the more I'm going to suffer. There was only one choice for me, which is just show me a way out of this. Just show me through this. Show me anything. And I turned away from all of, those reminders of my life, my athletic friends and my sporting life. And I thought to myself, okay, well, what now? And I think that that's a really important question we can ask. Okay, this has happened. So what next, or what now? And I think in that searching and the willingness to let go, that's when we start to see other possibilities in life. And I think it just expands. We know from, like my whole life now is about positive psychology and positivity and optimism. And we know, Barbara Fredrickson, for example, has done research into this. And we know that when we have more positive emotions, she calls the broaden and build theory. So we're just able to see more options, more possibilities. And that's something that we use not just in our personal lives, but as business people too.
You are so right. I know from personal experience that is a truth for me. And I recall at the beginning of the pandemic, I had conversations with various business leaders and friends and people that I was surrounded by about looking for the opportunities, looking for the solutions. Because if we are focused on fear, if we're letting the negativity overcome our thoughts and we're consumed by it, it just seems like it closes us off to what's actually in front of us, where the solutions are. So I couldn't agree with you more on that. So let's go back to that moment. The plane flies over, you're with your mom. Did you share at that moment when you said, if I can't walk, then I'm going to fly? Did you share that with your mom, or was that something that you held inside?
Oh, no, I was so excited. I was like, Mom, I'm going to fly. And it was actually quite funny. She's like, oh, that's nice. Would you like another cup of tea? I mean, it sounded ridiculous, and so that it was remarkable. And it was, I'd never wanted to fly in my life. And in fact, I think that it was an invitation. I've learned a lot from flying, having gone on then and becoming, as we know the story, I didn't just become a pilot. I became an aerobatic pilot, a commercial pilot, a flying instructor. So it was a journey that, I look back now, and it was so challenging, even just getting past a medical, for example, when I couldn't walk, and then, learning to walk and being motivated. And that was my why. Suddenly I had a reason to get out of bed. And of course, that created meaning around my accident and my injuries, which is exactly what Viktor Frankl talks about. He says we're driven by a will to meaning. So, it's really interesting when we talk about meaning, because I always say, when people say, well, what's the meaning of life? And I said, well, there isn't any meaning of life. There is meaning in life. It's the things you do, the actions you take that create meaning. Frankl says that we create meaning through relationships, through work, and through our suffering. And I think it's really important to remind ourselves that there's just not one big thing. It's all the little things that create meaning. And we get to do that. We get to create meaning. And there's, it changes throughout life as well. It's, I love the example of, when someone says, well, what's the best chess move? And you say, well, there isn't one best chess move. It depends where you are in the game, And so that's how I look at meaning too. It changes throughout life.
Yeah, it truly does. So since you brought that up, and it seems like it's such a topic of conversation these days, finding our why, finding our purpose. And I'm sure this is a conversation that comes up in conversations that you have often, but as you look at how one finds their purpose and their meaning, share with us what advice you would have for others on how they can find their purpose and meaning.
Well, it's up to the individual. That's a journey. I can't tell someone what their meaning is, but I can say that it's a choice, and we get to make choices. As I said, every moment is a crossroad. For example, I love that Viktor Frankl quote that you started with. And I think that even after my accident, I kept saying to myself, I realized I've come back to my body for a reason. I'm going to find out what that is. And, in the process of learning to fly, I didn't know that I was even going to write, be an author eventually. And of course, I wrote my first book, and that book got made into a movie. And I realized that I can really help people through my story. The more that I then became a speaker on the speaking circuit. And every time I shared my story, someone would come up to me and share their story with me. And it gave me this great sense of I'm not alone. There are other people that have been through incredible suffering. And that was my, I felt like I was helping other people, but they were helping me as well. And so I created meaning around that. I made a clear decision that things don't happen to me, they happen for me, that every obstacle also creates an opportunity. And so again, these are tools, and these are tools of resilience, which I've, now created. A few years ago, I sat down and went through this in a more formal way and created this resilience course. And, it's funny, someone said to me years ago, well, you've done all these things in your life. You've achieved all these amazing things, because you're so resilient. And I said, well, not really. I'm not resilient, despite these things. I'm resilient because of these things. It's the very things we go through that give us the opportunity to cultivate our resilience, our resilient mindset.
So let's tap into that then for a couple of minutes, because I think it's a very, very important topic to address around resiliency and how one can cultivate a mindset of resilience. And since you've developed a course around this, obviously we're going to link in the show notes to all the great things that you offer and what you're doing in this world. But let's speak to those who are running into some challenges that do have those roadblocks in front of them, whether it's in business, whether it's in life. And as you and I spoke before we turned the cameras on, I mean, we look at the two, right? Personal and professional. It's an intersection, right? We're all humans. We bring ourselves to our businesses as well as our personal lives. So everything that's happening in our lives comes along with us. So resiliency first. What does that mean to you? What does the word mean? And then let's start to look at how we can share ways to cultivate a resilient mindset.
Well, it's interesting, as I now launch into a PhD in resilience, there really isn't any one universal agreement into a definition of resilience. But most people say that it's, the ability, if you were asking people, they'd say, well, it's, the ability to bounce back. But really, it's the ability to adapt and change and to learn and grow. I sort of say it's more like the ability to bounce forward, to grow from adversity. And, I like to remind people that we're all resilient. The very fact that we're here, attests to that, especially after the few years that we've had. And we often fail to see that in ourselves. We often look at other people and say, oh, well, they're so resilient. And, I say, well, actually, look at your own life and look what you've overcome, and I'm a great fan of modeling too. If you can look back, I have one exercise, which is getting people to look back at a time in their life when they've had, a great obstacle to overcome, and to look at the steps they took and what they've learned from that. And if you can apply that, because I think life is repeating patterns, and if you can apply what you've learned in those situations and bring them into your present challenge, it just, you can sort of move through things, a lot more easily.
Well, let me ask you a question on that point, because to what you said about modeling, that's an important one. That's certainly something that I've applied as well, and that I look at ways of helping others there too. Can we also model others' responses to adversity? So whether it's looking back at our own lives and finding that moment where we overcame our own challenges, can we also learn through the experiences that others have had?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, modeling is, one of the constructs of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and a lot of people will be familiar with that. So absolutely. I mean, one great tool for resilience is to look at someone, find someone in your life or someone you might not even know who you think is resilient, and, start writing down, well, what are some of the qualities? What are some of the strengths that they have? And modeling from that. And I do think that we all have this, inner defiant spirit that, we need to tap into. We have this, sometimes it's like a pilot light that it's always there, and you sort of need to tap into that. And of course, my resilience course has practical science-based steps to help people do that.
Wonderful. What would you say, based on the number of people that you've coached and that you've helped, what is blocking us from being resilient? What is creating that armor, if you will, or something that's keeping us from really lighting up that, or turning up the heat on that pilot light?
That's a great question. And, I use a flying metaphor as an example for that. When I teach people to fly, there's a formula that we use, which is attitude plus power equals performance. And that's it's a mathematical formula that flies everything from a 747 to a glider to the little aerobatic aircraft I was teaching in. And so attitude is just a great word because it's what flies an airplane. It's the picture we see out the front of the cockpit. And I always say that it's our attitude. Our attitude is what helps us in life, either keeps us, helps us to soar or keeps us, stuck on the ground or blocked. And so our attitude is made up of our beliefs and our opinions and our judgments. And what we have to realize is that all of these things we've collected from a very young age, and we wear them like a pair of rose-colored glasses. We put them on, and all of it's the story of us. And we it's the I'm not good enough or I'm not smart enough. And we fail often to see that we're carrying those stories around with us and they color our lives. And sooner or later, it's time to put that bag down and unpack it. And because those habits are, is what holds us back. In psychology, we call it premature cognitive commitments, things that we hold on to that color our everyday lives. And, when we have a willingness to sort of clean that slate or start all over again, which is what happened with me after my accident. I had to let go of, all of those commitments to who I thought I was or how I think life was meant to be, because I knew I was going forward into life as now a woman with a disability. And so, I think that's our habitual way of thinking is what holds us back.
So would you call that, at least what you experienced, where you had to let go of what you had thought your life would be to something different? Is that an identity shift?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I had all sorts of, identity problems, conflicts from having been this elite athlete with this powerful body to someone who now had a body that was disabled, in a wheelchair, had to use a catheter. So there was a lot of that, really coming to terms with that. And I think, going back to my TED talk, which you said is called A Broken Body Isn't a Broken Person, the actual original name of my talk was I'm Not My Body. And when I was sitting down with the organizer of TEDx Kansas City, where I gave my talk, I remember Mike Lundgren said to me, your story is so incredible and remarkable. What's the one lesson you've learned from this? And I remember thinking, well, I'm not my body. I realized that everything I'd done with this broken body. It was all in my mind. It was my mindset that really got me where I was.
Incredible. Well, as you're talking about beliefs and habits and all of that stuff that we carry along with us, I love the analogy you gave, or the picture you gave of the luggage, right? We have to unpack that and let the stuff go that doesn't align with or support our purpose and our goals in life. Many times that takes a lot of deep work to really get to the root of those areas, right? And being able to work with someone who, like you, who can really help you identify those blind spots, because in many cases, right, they're on a subconscious level. Some of it is conscious, right? But so much of it is below the surface, and it affects everything, right? It affects everything we do. It affects our decision making, our relationships, the way we show up to the world. It's quite remarkable. But what a life-changing experience when you can start to identify those and reframe and change the identity.
Absolutely. I think there comes a time in life where, particularly when you're going through, a difficult time, but it doesn't have to be that, when you do put the bag down, unpack it, and, take that inner journey, which is the most important one we'll ever take.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to go back to flying for a moment. What is it about? What does flying represent to you?
Well, for me, it, obviously it saved my life. It gave me purpose. It helped me really sort of tap into my defiant spirit that, okay, I might not be able to do all those things, but I can fly. And I think it's just a wonderful metaphor for life, for freedom, for letting go, for, I can't tell you how many people have said to me, oh, I'm an athlete, for example. I don't know what I'd do if I couldn't do that anymore. And so, again, that shows this unwillingness to sort of let go and trust life. I think every experience that we have in life is life inviting us to let go and to trust. Everything is an invitation, and also an invitation not to take things too seriously, to sort of let go. I've had a lot of humor in my life. It's been really an important part of my life. And even Viktor Frankl says that humor helped them survive in the concentration camp as well. It's such an important healing aspect of life. Of course, humor is one of my steps in my resilience course as well. So these are all practical things. And, I'll just mention, because you did mention gratitude, that's the last step in my course. Gratitude is probably the most researched aspect of positive psychology. Dr. Robert Emmons has done a lot of work on gratitude. We know that it's science-based, that it's empirically proven that gratitude changes our brains. And I spent almost 6 months in a spinal ward, most of that time flat on my back, not able to move. But I made a decision very early on that everybody that came in to visit me, I was going to smile and thank them for coming in. And at that time, I didn't know that what gratitude was, the science of gratitude. But I really believe that attitude of gratitude, of being thankful to everyone, helped me survive almost 6 months in that spinal ward and in excruciating pain, might I add.
So what does your gratitude practice look like today?
So my gratitude practice today is I like to, wake up in the morning and be thankful, appreciate my day and the opportunities. And gratitude, we know that, a simple gratitude practice is, 3 good things. Every night, write down 3 good things that you're grateful for. And we know that just doing that for a few weeks has enormous benefits, up to 6 months, helping people through depression and anxiety. It really does shift our mindset. And even when we're in the most challenging circumstances, the neuroscientist, Dr. Alex Korb, says you don't actually, even if you're struggling to find something that you're grateful for, it's just being willing to look, being able to sit there and think, what am I grateful for? That shifts our brains. It has a neurochemical process that starts shifting in our brains. And the more grateful we are, the more we're able to see what we're grateful for in life. Does that make sense? It makes opens us up. So the more we practice gratitude, the more we start to see things that we're grateful for. It's a very powerful practice, and people can do their own research. They can look into that, into gratitude letters, for example. It's magic. It really is.
So as part of your gratitude practice, is it something that is it self-talk? Are you writing this down? Are you journaling?
Yeah. Well, now because it's become part of my everyday. But really, I say to people, you need to write it down, because they say that what's important is not just to write down what you're grateful for, but to write down why. What contribution did you have for that process? And so that also helps with self-efficacy. So it's a process. And I know that the psychologist Rick Hansen says what's important is to actually think about what you're grateful for, and then to hold that thought for, I think, up to a minute, to allow the neural pathways. That's what causes the change in our brains. So it's great. Just, I'm a meditator. I like to sit and meditate and have those moments of silence, which has also, been a really important part of my life.
Beautiful. When you meditate, do you use guided meditations? Do you meditate in silence?
I do a bit of both. I don't have as formal. I used to have a very formal practice, and now because I've been moving and traveling so much, it's sometimes I just, whatever floats the boat at the time, whether it's just sitting there with the timer on my phone for 20 minutes or doing a more formal body scan practice. So I've created actually a course on a mindfulness app, and part of that course is a body scan, which has helped me particularly with physical pain.
Very interesting.
Mm.
Had you been meditating prior to the accident?
No, not at all. That's something that happened probably 25 years ago. I started, meditating in a more formal way. I think I studied under, I did some work with Deepak Chopra and the Chopra organization and did some talks for them. And that's really what's, I guess, started me on a more formal practice of meditation.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Mm.
So you talk about loving the hills.
Mm.
Tell us what that means to you, and why do you love the hills so much?
Yeah.
And why should we love the hills as well?
Yeah, well, that's my mindset. Loving the hills is my sort of unique mindset, I guess. And that when I started my athletic career, I was, probably 6 or 7, and I always gravitated towards hills. I'm not sure why, but I did. And I realized that nobody else did. I'd go with my teammates and they'd all run on the flats and I'd run on the hills. And I realized that running on the hills, I sort of learned to love them, and it made me very strong, just not physically, but mentally as well. And I think that it's a great reflection of how we tend to do life as well, because the hills are the challenges in life. And we know that, it's in our DNA to turn from pain and head towards pleasure. In fact, Freud calls it the pain-pleasure principle. So, nobody's going to turn around and go, yeah, I really want a hard time. No, we want all the fun. We want to run on the flats. And so, I say to people, maybe we've got it wrong. Maybe we don't send our kids to school because we want them to have an easy time. We want them to be challenged. We want them to learn. That's how we grow. And so whatever challenges we have in life, they're our hills. Head towards them, turn towards them. And that is where we really tap into our resilience and our defiant spirit.
I love that. Yeah, that's something I'm going to visualize every time I run into adversity and realize that the true growth that's going to happen is going to be through that challenge itself. So I need to
lean
run
in
toward, lean in and run toward the hills.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
That's beautiful. So what is one thing that would surprise us to learn about you? You've got a lot of information out in social media and on the interwebs about your life.
Yeah.
What is something that would just surprise us to hear?
I'm not sure what would surprise you, but I've spent my entire life traveling. I'm a traveler, and I'm always around the world somewhere speaking and taking on a new challenge. But I'm a real homebody. I really love being at home, and I've loved being a mother. I think that you don't have to forsake one to have the other. I've really, really savored that experience. But I don't know if that's surprising. I think probably people that travel a lot do like being at home.
Yeah, no, that's good. I appreciate you sharing that. Would you consider yourself more of an introvert or an extrovert?
Definitely an extrovert.
Okay.
But, I think, I always love to say never either, always both. I think, a little bit of both. There are times, because I do travel a lot and I'm always sort of on a public stage, when I like to be home and not talk to anybody. I just like to be on my own and be at home. So, I think a bit of both.
Okay. Well, fair enough. Makes perfect sense. I definitely feel you on that one. So as many talks as you give, as often as you're on the stage and traveling, do you get nervous at all prior to giving a talk?
Well, I've had so many people, contact me over speaking and wanting to create their own speaking career. And I would say not nervous, but definitely pumped. And I think that's the difference. I think I feel like I have a message that I, am really passionate about. And so I think if you were backstage and about to walk out in front of thousands of people and you weren't pumped up, there'd be something wrong. I take it somewhat seriously. I really want to make sure I do a great job and deliver whatever it is that the briefing has been for that particular talk. I think probably the one talk that I got the most nervous, I guess you could say, was my TED talk. And that was, the TED stage is something, it's unique, and it's been an incredible blessing for me because my TED talk, so it was a TEDx talk in Kansas City, the same as Brene Brown. She also did a TEDx talk in her first one. And we actually had the same curator, Mike Lundgren, for both of our talks. And hers was, a few years before me. But of course, the TED stage, Kansas City is one of the biggest TEDx stages in the world. And so, yes, I was extremely nervous for that talk, but I had put around 5 or 6 months work into that particular talk. I had a very unique message that I wanted to deliver. And it was chosen by TED.com as the talk of the day. So a few months after, it was the one talk that they then put on the TED.com website. So it's been such a great journey, that TED journey.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it's such an inspiring, heartfelt talk. It's just one of those that you draw the listener in immediately, and you do such a beautiful job on that stage. And being someone who also speaks on stages from time to time, it's you could not sense any nervousness there at all. Excitement, maybe. Nervousness, don't see it. But yeah. So, and I bring that whole topic up because we have in our audience, we have those who are speakers that travel, that speak on various stages. And is there a piece of advice that you would share with someone who wants to grow their speaking career, that wants to be able to speak on larger stages? Is there a piece of advice that you would share with them about having a more successful delivery?
Yeah. Well, I've never been coached with my speaking. That's something that happened really organically. Although I did actually have a coach for my TED talk because I needed to deconstruct my keynote. And, instead of having 60 minutes, I had 18 minutes. So that was a really important aspect for me, to have new eyes to come in and do that. But I think the best advice when people ask me about that, and they say, well, how much do I need to practice? And I say, well, how good do you want it to be? So I put 6 months work into my TED talk. I knew it so well. Every time someone would come into my house, it's a very different talk. I had chairs on the stage. The whole talk is constructed around Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. So, I just rehearsed that so much because I thought the TED stage is huge. I get one crack at this. And, every time someone would come into my house, I had chairs set up in my lounge room. I'd say, sit down, sit down, sit down. And then I took that feedback and I constructed what I thought was, I'm really proud of that talk. And it's been not just the talk of the day on TED, but it's in a book called Talk Like TED. They've used my talk as an example. But also not being afraid to do things differently. Most people on the TED stage, for example, have slides and pictures. And I decided to use chairs, and of course, I have straws and no pictures because I was my story. My words were my story, and that was my performance. So I guess that's, my talk is very different in that sense.
Well, as I've mentioned, we're going to link to everything that you have available in the show notes here. And for all of you that are watching or listening right now, if you have not been one of the over 1.7 million people who have watched that TED Talk, please go out immediately and do so. And it is a remarkable story and a remarkable TED Talk. How does it feel for you now as you look back and realize that you've had the kind of impact that you've had on so many people, millions of people, and not only on the TED Talk, but just in terms of sharing your story, connecting with others, knowing that you're helping people? What does that feel like to you? What kind of responsibility is that like to you?
Well, of course, it's a great gift. And, I feel like it's created meaning and purpose around, experience that could have been, that was tragic and could have gone a completely another way. So I think that in the end, that's what we all want. We all want to know that our life counts, that our life matters. And you don't have to, you don't have to give a TED Talk or write books to make a difference in someone's life. You can volunteer, you can, whatever work you have is a way to give back. I think that being able to give back is probably, the greatest intervention for depression and anxiety and all the struggles that we're facing in our everyday life. We know that altruistic acts are are great for our own sense of well-being. So I think it's important to ask the question, well, what are my gifts, and how do I use those gifts to be of service in the world? And we all have gifts, we all have strengths. So, again, that's about taking that inner journey and really asking ourselves, why am I here? What is my purpose in life? Where am I going? How do I serve?
Beautiful. Share with us about your PhD program and what you are creating.
Yeah. Well, from my, as I said a couple of years ago, I sat down and thought, well, what are the steps that I've taken to be able to, rebuild and recreate my life? And I came up with 12 steps. And from that, I created this course. And I thought, well, I'm a great fan of positive psychology, and I've done a lot of work in that area. And I thought, when you're in a spinal ward, it's all about what's wrong with you. You'll never do this again. And I thought, well, what about we flip that on its head and we start with, well, what's right with you? You might be in a wheelchair, or you might have a spinal cord injury, but you still have strengths. You still have potential. Your life still has possibilities. So what would happen if we introduced that into a spinal ward? And of course, the more I researched into it, I realized that there is nothing like this. There's nothing that's ever been done in the world in the spinal cord unit that involves positive psychology interventions. So what I'm doing with my PhD is I'm adapting this resilience course for spinal cord injury units and really assessing changes in resilience. So it's a huge journey for me. My daughter actually said, Mum, that's not the most, PhD is going to be easy for you. You spent 6 months lying in a spinal ward. And I went, not really. I think it's going to be a lot of work. But I'm really excited to create something and give something back to the people that gave me so much.
Wow. That's remarkable. Such an amazing thing to do and a way to give back. I love that. So share with us with all that you've accomplished, the challenges that you've faced, the way that you've been able to reinvent yourself, and the PhD program that you're going through. What other areas are you focused on that push you to grow personally and professionally?
Well, I think being out of your comfort zone is a great thing for growth. And, even being on the stage doing my keynotes last week, I was speaking, as we mentioned, I was speaking in Tampa, Florida, and the organization said, well, we want you to do something a little different. We want you to do a bit more of a workshop type of talk on your course on resilience. So even though it was challenging, because my keynotes, I've been doing this for a long time, so it's very easy for me to get up and talk in different ways for an hour. But suddenly I thought, okay, well, this is challenging. I have to do something different. And it was great. I was really energized and excited. I split my presentation up into a very short sort of a keynote, more like a TED talk. And then we spent some time going through some of the exercises in my resilience course. And it was fun. It was really challenging. Of course, as a speaker, you'll know when you're trying something new, there's always, that part of you that goes, oh, how is this going to be? But the way I look at it is, this is great. This is a challenge. I get to do something different. I get to explore. I get to grow, and you can sort of feel yourself growing in that experience. So, yeah, I really like to challenge myself. My newest book, Defiant, is actually been optioned in Hollywood, and we're working on that at the moment. And I'm working as a producer on that. So you might see that come to life on the big screen soon.
Wow, that is so remarkable. That is wonderful. Have they already cast you?
No, we're just talking to, I want a female team. So we're talking to an up and coming female director at the moment. And this will be a female story, of course. And I've got some ideas, but I won't share those right now. Yeah.
That's okay. We'll do that. We'll do that in round two. We'll do that in round two, Janine.
It'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Absolutely. That is so exciting. So why don't you share with our audience a challenge that you would give to them and to me?
A challenge? Well, let's go back to letting go. I think that it's a skill. And, if we can start to let go of the small things in our life, start to ask yourself, what can I do a little differently? Can I let go of my need to jump out of bed in the morning and pick up my phone and scroll through my messages? Get up in the morning and spend the first hour without your phone, without social media. Challenge yourself. Have a screen-free day, maybe every Sunday. Make it a day just to be with family and relationships. I mean, we're all so used to picking up our phones and, it's the first thing we do in the morning. So, that can be pretty challenging.
I like that. That's a great starting point. So for all of you listening right now, take Janine up on that challenge. And why don't you share with us how it's going?
Yeah. First hour of the day, no social media, no news. See how it goes. I'd love to hear.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you sharing that one. So before I ask my final question to you, please share with us where we can go to connect, where you would like us to visit to be able to consume all your amazing content, purchase your books, and just get closer to you and your world.
Right. Well, all of the, obviously on LinkedIn, Janine Shepherd, Twitter at Janine Shepherd. I'm on Instagram, Janine_Shepherd. And Facebook, Janine Shepherd, author, motivational speaker. So, I look forward to connecting with everyone there. And if they go to my website, JanineShepherd.com, they can do a little resilience test. They can get I think there's a few little free exercises they can look through there and scroll through some previous little insights of newsletters.
Terrific. Well, we will certainly link to that as well as your TED Talk, where to purchase your books, all those wonderful things in the show notes here. So here is my... And we can,
and I'm also happy, I'll send you my resilience checklist, and it's something that people can print off, put it up on their fridge and remind themselves that they are resilient, but it is a skill that can be cultivated and learned.
Wonderful. Thank you for doing that. We'll make sure that we share that out as well. That's a beautiful thing. So here is my final question to you. What are you adding or eliminating from your life to live more fulfilled and with greater purpose?
Well, going back to what we talked about before, I've started to, just a small thing, go through my email list and get rid of subscriptions to certain things, cut down my, my diet of having to read the news so much, because I know that during the pandemic, we're all following it. What are the statistics? What are the vaccination rates? What are the numbers? So I think we've come to a point in time when I've realized that's not the healthiest way to live. So I want to spend less time on my phone, less screen time, and definitely less news time, more positive time.
Hear, hear. I am right there with you. Is there a question that I didn't ask you that you would like to share?
No, I think we've covered a lot, and I'll just leave everyone with my final words, which is love the hills. What hill are you facing right now? And what's one small thing you can do? It's just one small thing. And if you can get up and do that one small thing, and then get up the next day and do that one small thing, and do that day after day after day, sooner or later, you'll be over that hill and doing things that you once thought were impossible.
So good. So good. Janine, I want to again thank you so much for joining us on Business Minds Coffee Chat. I truly am grateful for you. Thank you for sharing of your experiences. Thank you for putting your words out in such meaningful and powerful ways. Thank you for helping to inspire us and just being so open and wonderful. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been a delight, as I said.
It is my pleasure. And for all of you, thank you so very much for watching and listening. And would you do us a favor? Take a moment to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. We would greatly appreciate that. Let us know what you thought about this episode. And to enjoy more episodes and to learn how Jay Shear Business Consulting can build a solid foundation for your business, all you need to do is visit jshearbusinessconsulting.com. And until next time, keep learning, keep growing, pick up a copy of Defiant, and we'll see you on the next Business Minds Coffee Chat. Take care.
Jay Shear.
Jay Shear.
Business Consultant.
Jay Shear Business Consulting.